morning, I think. Yes, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me talk to you about one of the things in life that I am passionate about. So as a brief introduction, I'm one of the co-founders of Breega. We are a founders fund of $200 million US, launched 4 years ago. And at the time, everyone thought we were crazy. We are three entrepreneurs, have launched a dozen businesses, sold the majority of them. The biggest one was exited for 8 billion euros. And we were very frustrated by the relationship we had with VCs. Not that they're not great professionals, but like in the early days of a company, it's kind of complicated to know how it works and what it requires in terms of execution. You mentioned it earlier, if you haven't done it yourself. That's why we created Breega, with entrepreneurs managing it and investing very early stage in businesses across Europe. Today I'm here to talk about Fintech, because Fintech has been around for a while now on a very simple assumption. So if I were to ask you, what's a bank? You would probably come up with a lot of different words and names, but a bank is literally one of the very first marketplace. Why are banks marketplace? Because they're a supply of money. People who actually give their money to the bank because they trust them. And back in the early days, you would trust a bank because you were, living in the far west of the United States and you could get robbed. So like, oh, fuck, have some money. I want my money safe. That's the supply part of the marketplace. And then you have the demand. Because, after a while, banks realized that, they would probably be able to actually get the supply for almost free. And so they built these big vaults, and out of that, they make it a marketplace. They use the money sitting there to lend it to others, to invest into others. And that's the demand part of a marketplace. And if you were to talk to a banker today, they would probably, wait around for a second and think about it, but that's literally who they are and what they do. And why is Fintech so booming, or has been so booming lately? For a very simple reason. 2008, 2009, global financial crisis. All of a sudden, something is broken on two different angles. First of all, the trust is not there, and so the trust you need in a marketplace wasn't working anymore. A lot of people were actually, fearing the relationship with the banks, disliking the way bankers would behave, and the trust was broken. And B, the supply was missing. And if you look at one of the very first fintechs in the United States, they are all around real estate, because obviously, the GFC came out of the real estate crash. But people, normal people, non-prime people were still wanting to invest, buy their home, and there was no cash available. So if you're a fintech, at that time, thanks to tech, and you build trust, you convince supply, because people had some money on one hand, and there's demand with people who wanted to invest, buy a home, and secure their future. Out of this, built an amazing world of different opportunities, because in this turmoil, people were like, okay, we can build trust, and blockchain is obviously part of this. We build trust outside of the banking system, and we get supply on one hand and demand on the other one. This led to a massive market, because finance is probably one of the juiciest and biggest market of all. Fintech alone in 2017 received 31 billion USD across the world. That's just a massive number. And we European, we've just seen the acquisition of IZ also. That's 2 billion on its own. That's a massive number, right? It's massive because everyone needs finance, everyone needs payment, and in a world where the economy is developing, obviously, we need to get this marketplace rolling. But what to expect in the future? What to expect in the coming years? Because if you look at it, obviously, on the back of what I discussed, two major innovations actually helped the emergence of these new marketplaces, these new funding circles, these new places where people, supply and demand, could fund. One of them was the digitization of our everyday lives, and smartphones are part of that. iPhone was 2007, so by 2009-10, GFC, everyone was kind of linked to the internet, and then cloud services. Obviously, if you look at banks and the way they were built historically, after the big, strong, metal vaults, were the first ID systems. And I'm not going to give you the name of the bank, but I know one in the city of London that still runs a chunk of their database on PIN cards. And I know it's not great, but that's true. So there's a lot of legacy there. And obviously, if you come up as a startup with the cloud and all these new processes and iPhones, and obviously you rock the bank. That's easy. That's normal. But the banks can step up. I mean, the banks have a lot of money. So when you're an entrepreneur and you launched a startup 4 or 5 years ago, the banks didn't know about acquisition on Facebook. They didn't have an app. They didn't know what cloud was about. So it was fairly easy. It was a massive unfair advantage to us, to entrepreneurs. Well, nowadays, because they have a lot of money and they're not stupid, they know how to do it, right? So they know how to kind of cope with the B2C angle of what entrepreneurs tackle first. It's not great. It's not amazing. I know you probably have a bank stat that sucks in your iPhone, but one day, and probably sooner than later, they'll make it up. But what's left? What's left is the rest of the process, right? So the one thing that we see is just the tip of the iceberg. But as I said, the vast majority of the processes in the bank, the processes in an insurance company, everything is still very much from the 80s. And there's a huge potential there. If you look at that thing, and I'm not going to be, too boring, but it's an interesting way of looking how the tech world, it's true for fintech, insurtech, but it's true for everything, right? If you look at how it developed in the 27 to 2017, that sort of 10-year, time frame, on the front end, I talked about mobile, and on the back end, I talked about cloud. These were the two major innovations that sort of supported the innovation for the last 10 years. And, from the fintech companies to Uber, they're very much depending on that, right? What's the future in innovation that is going to change the world in the fintech space, but in the innovation space as a whole? There's a big chunk of things coming up from blockchain on one end, VR on the other end. We all know that it's probably a little early stage. Do you need a VR experience to use your bank on a day-to-day basis? Well, probably not, unless your banker, he or she's hot. You're like, okay, well, maybe I want to be a VR conversation with them every day, but probably no. On the blockchain side of things, cryptocurrency have blurred the message a bit, and everyone is kind of focused on that at the moment. But it is true, when you think about the simple definition of blockchain, having a decentralized, secure ledger is literally what banks have done for years. Like, it's trust between supply and demand, and you want to control this. So there's a lot of different verticals in innovation where blockchain is going to be fundamental in changing the way we do things on the back end of things. And then in the middle, going from the sort of back end to front end, is AI. And how big is AI? Well, it's massive, right? It's any piece of data we process as humans into the hands of machines. It can be very specific, it can be broader, but that's technically what it is. So it can go from accounting, because obviously your accountant on a day-to-day basis probably spends 80% of his day crunching numbers and organizing numbers, and then probably 10 to 20% advising you as an entrepreneur. So, I mean, if you think about it, in the sort of 21st century, OCRing numbers and crunching them is something machines can do, right? So AI can go that way. AI can go on the front-end side of things. If you're a chatbot, or you probably saw the Google demo the other day, there's a couple of very simple stuff that robots can actually take care of. So obviously, it's going to have a massive impact on our lives. Nothing I'm teaching you here, but we're only seeing, at the moment, the beginning of this AI revolution, which is going to be cross-border between front and back. So if you are an entrepreneur and thinking of what should you do in the fintech space today, well, you know, the revolution is probably on the B2B side of things. Dealing with banks, because as I said, a lot of their processes are still very old-fashioned. A lot of the way they innovate is very superficial, so very sort of towards the front aspect of things, but all of their middle, back, and regulation aspect of things isn't covered properly, isn't, you know, digitized properly, and, you know, with regulation changing all the time, banks are suffering on that end. And even on the B2B side of things, I mean, you know, a lot of fintech companies have innovated on the consumer side of innovation, but what's left for corporates, what's left for businesses? Not much. So there's a lot of stuff to do in that sense, and I'm sure there's a lot of great companies we're going to see there in the coming years. So how do we do this? How do we maximize the future of tech in finance, insurance, and in innovation as a whole? Obviously, as I said, you know, AI will probably change the world as much as machines and robots changed, you know, the industry a couple of decades ago. But if you look at it, there's still a couple of people looking after the machines, right? So the future of tech will be the combination of e-robots, you know, these AI machines working like they were working in plants 10, 20 or 30 years ago, and people for, you know, the way we train them, the way we build them, and the way we interact, because at the end of the day, business is about people relationship, and therefore, I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why you are here today. Otherwise, we would have had this via Skype with AI machines answering questions, which probably wouldn't have been as great as what we're experiencing now. And one other big thing I was mentioning, you know, with the pin cards about this London-based famous bank, is the better understanding of data. Obviously, that's where we're going, you know, because data is everywhere, and data is everywhere, especially in finance. If you look at a European bank account, I'm not going to give you the numbers of payments we do a month, but the number of incoming flow we have every month, on average, is 7. That's just unbelievable. We have 7 different sources of inflow between our salaries, you know, our insurance companies' payments, our friends paying us back. And so if you triple, quadruple, you know, that to payment, that's a lot of data. And obviously, fintech is all about that. So we haven't seen much yet. But with PSD2 coming in place and a lot of companies looking at what they can do with that, there's an immense world of potential innovation. So if I were you, if I were an entrepreneur today, well, still am actually, but if I have time to launch a new business in the fintech space, I will definitely look at that. AI-based B2B innovation, and you know, from RegTech to processes, there's a lot of stuff to be done, so don't hesitate. It's the right time to innovate again, so jump on stage and please convince us that you're the next project to fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was amazing and informative, and I think that you proved